Okay, shall we spend a little bit of time with Joshua?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Go for it.
So, as you may remember, where we left off was the Battle of Ai had been lost. There had been a rout by an inferior force. An inferior force had defeated the force of Israel. That Joshua had been told, send 2,000-3,000 men. They have no real military at all. It's really more like a police force, and it'll be a rout. And to their surprise, 36 people were killed. Some say 36, some people say 1, and they were chased down the mountainside by the enemy. Right? Joshua immediately understood that this was not about a physical defeat, that something terrible had happened in the camp, causing the army to lose its will and its ability to defeat the enemy. It says he threw himself on his face. It says he threw himself on his face and cried. And they went to determine who it was that was responsible for this catastrophe. Right? Earlier they had had a major success in the Battle of Jericho, where they had defeated much greater forces with much greater defenses. God asked Joshua who was responsible for this. God said, I'm not telling you. You'll have to find out for yourself, but there is somebody. And they determined to use a goral. Goral is a lottery process. And the lottery process is something that has a long history. We choose which of the goats is for Azazel and which is for Hashem by a goral. We choose...
It's a Hebrew word, goral?
Yeah, yeah.
Goral is actually destiny.
We choose... We choose... Haman chose what day of the month of Adar would be an auspicious day to kill all the Jews through a pur, which is a Persian word for lottery. Maybe the most important lottery in our history was the division of the land of Israel, which was done through lotteries as well, that God had instructed Joshua to do it through lotteries. So Joshua decided that this would be how they would determine who was responsible for desecrating the Jewish people. Right? Originally, the first lottery that was chosen was what tribe the individual was from. And the lottery came up Yehuda. Right. And then the next question was from what clan, from what family within the tribe. And it came up with a specific name. And then whose house it was within that family. Right. Each one was a number of lotteries that could cover that group, that universe. Right. And then finally within the family, who the individual was. Right. And it fell on Achan, was his name. Achan, from the tribe of Yehuda. And Achan denied the validity of the process. He said, this doesn't make any sense. It wasn't me, it's somebody else. And he fought back, and he claimed that Joshua was being a bit of a demagogue at this point. His words echo the words of Korach, when Korach was speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu. It sounds like Achan is a much more democratic individual than is Joshua, and a much more reasonable person than Joshua. You know, where's your evidence? Kind of question. You're going by this kind of mystical process, right? In the end, where we left off was Joshua, after all these accusations were made, turned to him and says, how did Joshua respond? He said, my son, this is the first dispute among this is firstly a dispute among family members. Right? The Jewish people are now a family responsible for each other, just as family members are responsible for one another. Right? And so Joshua referred to him as my son, indicating to him that this was not a political issue, but really one of internal family. Please give honor to God and confess to Him. Tell me, please, what you have done. Do not withhold anything from me. Secondly, do not impugn the integrity of the lottery system. Don't cast doubt on the lottery system. because such a system will be used to divide the land of Israel among the tribes. God has instructed us to do it that way. At the very least, admit that the lot is accurate and reliable. There's no other way to equitably determine who gets a parcel of the land of Israel. And if people lose faith in the lottery, we will never be able to dwell in the land. So this question of whether the lottery system works is not just about your guilt or innocence, but it's about the whole settlement of the land of Israel. Neither you nor I can effectively decide how the land will be fairly distributed, and that is why the lottery system based on divine will was in place. It was a brilliant political maneuver, writes the author. Yehoshua said that the lottery benefits everybody. If the people were inclined to accept the lottery for the distribution of the land, they would certainly accept it for the determination of the identity and fate of a single individual. In one swift stroke, Yehoshua validated the lottery as the most impartial means of allocating the land, and therefore deprived Achan of his following and his most compelling argument. Achan realized that if people do accept the Goral, and they must, regarding the allocation of the land of Israel, they will accept its conclusions regarding his fate as well. Yehoshua legitimized the Goral as the most equitable system, and in front of the people ratified the involvement of God in their affairs. Yes?
Can we use the idea like this in your personal life?
A Goral?
Lottery, yeah. If you
Today?
decide, should I do this or that?
To the best of my knowledge, we don't do that today. We don't do that.
Why?
That would be flipping a coin?
Yeah.
It happens in our lives, but I don't think that's... I haven't heard of people using a Goral. Has anybody heard of that?
I saw at some place that even open the Sefer Torah, if you have something that you don't know, something bothers you and you need an answer, so even
Isn't this similar
open
thing?
to open the Torah and just to read the answer, even this is not...
There's a long history going back to the time of the Gemara to do such things, right? That is to say, where you open a document, a sacred document, can be an indication or give you a hint, an answer. People have done it with Tehillim for many years. People do
Mordechai just did it with boys. What did you learn in school?
That's right.
This is what
That's right.
was saying.
That's right. Mordecai asked the three boys what it is that they learned that day and how it impacts them. We hold that this is another form of determining things. So, I don't know a lot of people who do this, although there are people who write questions and put them in books that they determine are holy for answers and hold by those things. But generally a Goral in the same system as this, I haven't heard of it of late. That doesn't mean it's not done. I'm just not aware of it.
By the way, we said, Yelena said about Mordechai and these three kids. We say it after every Amida. The last.
We say it at the end of Elenu. The end of Elenu.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Not Amida, they pray.
What?
Every Alenu.
No, it's at the end of Elenu.
Yeah, we say it. It's
Whenever some say. It always says some people say.
Yeah. Some people.
Yeah.
Like
When
Lubavitcher.
Korach rebelled, God himself had to confirm Moshe's authority through the earthquake that swallowed up Korach and his followers. Yehoshua accomplished the same goal by persuading Achan to validate the Goral and reveal the will of Hashem. So it wasn't necessary to go through quite the same situation. After Achan authenticated the lottery, Yehoshua induced Achan to reveal all his crimes. And Achan was exposed not as an ideologue motivated by love of Torah, but as a scoundrel who committed a number of crimes motivated by greed, arrogance, and contempt of Torah. So very often we see this in many different situations where people make the most lofty claims to support their point of view, and really the bottom line is it's about power, it's about wealth, it's about striving for something themselves, and they use it. My father, whose memory should always be a blessing for us all, used to say that when people tell you it's not about the money, it's about the principle, it's always about the money. Right? It's always. Right? That's the beginning of a discussion about money. Right? Achan himself, right, had committed a variety of crimes, right? Achan had stolen the Babylonian garment, the cloak. And what was this Babylonian garment? This is a very interesting thing. We learned this from the Gemara. That it was actually the cloak of the king of Babel, taken from the king's summer home, Jericho, right, Jericho. The king of Babylon used to spend his summers in Jericho because it was a nice place to be. So he had taken actually the king's garment, right, of Babel. And in so doing, right, that was his loot from Jericho. Well, this was part of his loot from Jericho, was this garment of the king of Babylon. And thereby, and in so doing so, he proclaimed to everyone his intention to the throne of Israel. Now, let's remember, everybody remember what tribe he came from? Yehuda, right? So that is where the kings of Israel come from. Suddenly the force of Achan's arguments dissipated and succumbed. Achan sought power, and his path to power was paved with the arrogance of a separatist. The rules that govern the lives of all men did not apply to him, especially the laws of Torah. Thus Chazal perceived that Achan invariably committed a host of sins, violating all of the Torah's laws. He excluded himself from the group that accepted the Torah unanimously at Sinai. So this, what we're going to talk about now, actually should have a very familiar echo, right, as we come to Pesach, right? So Achan, having gone through all of the drama of the life in the desert, all of the daily miracles in the desert, right, said, I'm not part of this. I'm not part of this, right? I have my own set of rules. I can benefit from this. But I'll benefit from it on my terms. After all, I'm from a kingly family. He excluded himself from the group that had accepted the Torah unanimously at Sinai. He hid his circumcision, i.e., he did not identify himself with Klal Yisrael. And the ravaging of a young bride. He took a woman who is between Erevin and Kedushin, right? She was already engaged, but had not completed the chuppah process, right? And he raped her. He asserted his right to seize anything for himself, even a maiden betrothed to another man. Some Jews renounced their Jewish identity and fancied themselves citizens of the world. Achan renounced his Jewish identity and fancied himself a citizen of his own world. Right? One of the definitions of someone who is psychotic is someone who believes that the laws of the rest of the world have no application to him. The social norms, the legal norms, they don't really apply to me at all. It's not that I'm doing something wrong. I just have a different system. That's all. Achan was a free thinker who advocated individual autonomy. He was not at all bound by the Torah system. The ultimate autonomy for such a Jew is the repudiation of his membership in the Jewish people. He purported to sever his ties with Jewish people by removing the distinctive mark of the male Jew, the milah, the bris. He bore no allegiance to any group beyond his own tribe, meaning not the tribe of Israel. There's a long history of it.
Well, that's what Curry says, Mama.
Reverse circumcision?
Yeah.
Oh, didn't the Greeks do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Hellenists.
You told me about this.
The Hellenists, and it happens today, by the way.
This is what he did. He didn't really have much time for that. I think it's a time-consuming process.
He did it very quick. As a real Jew on Pesach.
He did it after Pesach, maybe, right? First on Pesach, then all that. I don't know. I'm not sure when he did it. Yeah.
The term not talking timeline is
Not necessarily.
The time is very often compressed or enlarged, both in Torah and when you're on a treadmill. You know, when you're on a treadmill, you think you've been on it for 20 minutes, you look down, minute and a half passed.
He probably, the process of withdrawing himself.
For sure. Yeah, no, this didn't happen then. No, for sure. These were qualities in him. Right.
So let me come back a little bit. It means that he's psychotic?
No, I didn't say that he was psychotic. I said one of the qualities of someone who is psychotic, right, is that he believes that the rules that are made for the rest of the world don't apply to him. And I'm not talking about, paying taxes.
So why he was
Right.
punished?
What?
If he has some mental problem, my question, why to punish him?
It's not the second rule, it's a choice.
No, I didn't say that he was psychotic. I said people who are psychotic don't believe the rules that apply to everybody else apply to them. Right? There are also people who are just bad people who believe that too. They know what the rules are and they know they should apply, but they say, someone who's psychotic doesn't actually feel guilty about violating the laws of the land, just like they don't apply to them. Somebody who is an evil person knows them and says, I don't need to do it. Right? I can get away with it. Right? It's a different kind of conscience. I didn't say that, he was temporarily insane at the time that he did this.
But it's a little bit like hippie in 60s.
Like,
Hippie in 60s, they wanted to change everything.
You're talking
Yeah.
to the wrong person.
yeah, they did. Yes, they did.
He was a hippie in 60s.
Who, Achan?
Hit the nail, huh? No. Hit the nail.
I don't think they succeeded, if that's what they wanted to do.
No, after a couple of years, they cut the hair, they put suits on, took
People who survived.
And
the-
became bankers.
Yeah,
Right.
they just
Or filmmakers or rabbis. Who knows?
realized.
Yeah.
They were particularly attractive to the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Yes.
He liked them because they were rebellious, and he thought that was a good quality. As long as they were rebellious, probably within a certain framework, I would imagine. He purported to sever... Okay. He also chafed at the denial of the monarchy, right? Because who's running the country, right? Not somebody from the tribe of Yehuda.
Just one moment, please. Sorry, can you please go back?
Take a message.
Can I take a message?
He also chafed at the denial of the monarchy that should rightfully be his privilege or that of his tribe. This nourished a permanent sense of deprivation. He didn't get what he wanted and what he felt he was entitled to. Entitlement is often the source of tremendous depression in people and anxiety and anger. This is what I'm entitled to, and I'm not getting it, right? Whatever that is. Right? In Chazal's lexicon, in their dictionary, the greatest act of selfishness and impudence is the violation of a nara me'erusa, right? of a betrothed woman, a maiden who is merely awaiting, who is merely nahara.
That engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A betrothed woman who is merely awaiting the completion of the last stage of marriage process before consummating the marriage with her intended husband. Achan's personality brooked neither self-control nor recognition. He wouldn't put up with either self-control or recognition of the rights of others. He grabbed whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted it, because he was Achan. Now, there's somebody else in our history who was the same, by the way, if you think about it for 1 second. Right?
This was king.
Yeah, Esau. Right? Right? Because remember, we said Esau was very well loved by his father. Right? His father, in the Torah, stands for what? And he stands for din, for judgment, for gevurah, for strength. Right? This was a quality that Yitzchak used on himself. Yitzchak was very internal. That he examined, he was constantly working on himself to improve his own midas, to do this. Right. He had 2 sons. One of his sons was very much like him, Esau. He had another son who was very much like his grandfather, Yaakov. Right. Esau was very, very much into gevurah and power, but didn't direct it to himself. He directed it to others. Right. Avraham had the same, right? Avraham had 2 sons, right? Avraham was tremendous with chesed, not to himself, to others, right? So the question is, how do you use these qualities, right? Ishmael used these qualities on himself. Esau used power not to examine himself, correct himself, improve himself, but to dominate others, right? He felt he had his own set of rules as well. Not unlike Achan in terms of a description. Now, let's look at the other side of it, is Yehoshua, right? We have Achan in one place and Yehoshua on the other. Conversely, Yehoshua, upon hearing the defeat of Ai, first tore his clothing. If Jews were killed in Ai because of the sins of the generation, then he as the leader was personally responsible. He took immediate responsibility for this, right? He did not need a commission to investigate the catastrophe, nor was he looking for some contrived absolution from the media or his peers. And Yehoshua tore his garments, and he fell on the ground before the ark of Hashem until evening. He and the elders of Israel, and they placed dirt upon their heads. True leaders, when confronted with failure, do not seek refuge, or disinformation, or dissembling distractions, or scapegoating. Yehoshua stood up, took the heat, blamed himself for the failure at Ai. He grieved and mourned, and then began searching for the hidden spiritual flaw that allowed this tragedy to occur. I was reminded recently in a class that I attended that it may not have been, there's an opinion that it may not have been for the sin of eating the apple for which, or the fruit, for which Adam was cast out of the garden, but rather his reaction that Chava and he had to the question, what did you do? Right? Because he immediately said,
the woman gave it.
She made me do it, right? And she said, the snake made me do it, right? This sense of failure to take responsibility for your own actions in the world in which God has created is a very, very serious concern. Very serious concern, because after all, we are not made in the image of the dog, of the pet, of the programmed animal.
It's not just he didn't take the responsibility. He said, the woman that you give to me.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And she blames something else as well.
Of
right?
course, you created something.
So in the end, you know, what they're all saying is, we're not responsible, right? God is the ultimate entity who's responsible for everything and takes responsibility for everything. You know, when you list a terrible atrocity that has happened, to think that that's outside of God is a heresy. It is within God. It's within a system that God created. It's a very painful thing for us to understand, and difficult, and makes us feel sometimes like God is vengeful or cruel, right? But perhaps it's better to feel that than to believe there is some contesting forces with God. That Satan is making this happen and God is opposed to it, for instance. No, we don't believe that way. There is actually one force in the universe. And immediately, when you don't take responsibility for your own actions, you're saying, I am not made in the image of God. I'm denying my creation as a unique entity in this universe. And this is something that is very troubling, you know, because what God expects from us is to act like in a godly fashion in the most dramatic ways, you know, to be kind, to be thoughtful, to have the right things, but above all, not to say, you know, the devil made me do it. We don't believe in this. We believe we did it. We take responsibility always. True leaders, when confronted... Okay, we read this part here. He grieved, he mourned, and he began searching for the hidden spiritual flaw that allowed the tragedy to occur. The Gemara in Sanhedrin 44a implies that 36 Jews were not killed at Ai, but only one, Yair ben Menashe, whose spiritual greatness was the equivalent of the entire Sanhedrin majority. The Meiri commented that this means the Sanhedrin was responsible for maintaining the religious integrity of the Jewish people, not only for revealed sins that are under their explicit jurisdiction, but also for hidden sins. The influence of the Sanhedrin meaning the High Court itself, the influence of the Sanhedrin was such that they were obligated to uphold the spiritual level of the people. As best they could, the Sanhedrin had to know what was lurking in the heart of every Jew, what questions, flaws, heresies, vulnerabilities, or doubts. Yair ben Menashe symbolized the entire Sanhedrin and the institutional failure that took place. Now we have another time when this happens. Does anybody recall what it is?
What happened to
when an organization or individuals take responsibility for the flaws of the nation?
Yeah, when they're washing hands over the...
Very good, right?
When somebody killed between the two cities, do you remember? When the body is found between two cities, they measure Which city it's
Oh,
closest?
you're talking about the cities of refuge?
No.
No, between two cities. If somebody is murdered on the road between two cities,
Halacha that Yosef learned with his.
that's right. That's right.
Break the neck of
Agala.
What's the difference between that and Christianity?
It's a very important point. I'm going to get to that in a second.
Expression of washing the hands over something, like I wash my umываю руки, that come from there.
Is that the elders of the nearest city are required to come to the place where it happened. They break the neck of a donkey.
No,
Right.
it's a donkey? Is that a cow?
Yeah. No.
Donkey.
I think it's a donkey.
I think so.
Yeah. Egla roof. No, it's a cow. You're right.
No, Egla roof is different.
Yeah, this is a
Egla roof is someone's tummy. Egla roof is the red cow.
No.
No, that's paraduma. That's paraduma. Yeah, egla rufa, right? Because it's like a gala, like wagon. Egla, a gala, right? With Yosef, the wagons of Yosef, right? So it's a pun that how Yaakov knew that it was from his father. Well, I don't want to go into it. But there's another one that's probably more similar, and that is that when a person is killed by mistake, by accident, in Israel, in ancient Israel, what we would call today manslaughter, the person flees to a city of refuge, right? He remains there until how long? Does anybody know?
The high priest will die.
Till the Kohen Gadol dies, right? So that could be 2 years, or it could be 50 years, right? Okay. And he virtually can't leave there, because if he leaves there, then the people who he's responsible for killing could kill him, the relatives, right? So what would happen, right? The people in these cities of refuge would begin to pray that the Kohen Gadol would die.
And the mothers were running
Right?
too.
They would pray he should die because when he dies, they can leave, right?
So the mother, they asked me to...
So the like every good Jewish mom, the mother of the Kohen Gadol would go from each of these cities, place to place, bringing care packages to the people there, sweets, clothes, whatever, and beg the people, pray for the welfare and the health of my son, right? In exchange for this,
It's
right?
two groups. One is praying for that, one is
So
praying for
what is this about? What is this about? How can this have any force at all, right? The reason it has any force is that we have an understanding that because a person would commit an act that was so thoughtless that it could kill another person, a bucket fall off a roof, an axe handle fly off the axe, right? Not killing anybody that they intended to. A person cutting off somebody on the road and back behind them, 3 cars, an accident, any number of things, right? How's that connected to the Kohen Gadol? And the answer is there is a connection to it, right? The Kohen Gadol should have set an example at such a high level that people would understand your concern is not just the letter of the law, but a concern for your fellow. That it's very important to be thinking, how is what I'm doing affecting others, right? Not simply, am I stealing from them or not, but am I creating an environment where somebody could be hurt, right? I have a responsibility not to create such an environment, right? To go the extra step. With the Kohen Gadol who set such an example, then there's nobody in these cities of refuge. But with a Kohen Gadol who might have some arrogance or whatever, maybe some people would say, well, I understand his example, and that's how I am. When we see something happen with a person who we revere in some way, who we trust and revere, and then we see, gee, this is a terrible thing that they did, it doesn't just change our feeling about that individual. It changes sometimes our feelings about ourselves or about our whole system of activity. We see corruption in high places, right?
We say in Russian, the fish smells from the head.
Say it in English too. The fish smells from the head, yeah. So, in such a situation, the Kohen Gadol is held responsible for it, right? So what is the difference, you asked, between this and Christianity? One is a responsibility for your behavior. It's not that the person is actually responsible for the sins of the people, but it's responsible for the fact that they weren't thinking properly, as an example, right? He's not actually taking their sins on his shoulders in that situation.
So who is responsible that Adam ate from the tree?
Adam. Adam.
Who's the boss?
What?
Who's the boss?
Who's the Kohen Gadol of that time? Who ran
What?
the show?
In the
Adam
time of
was.
Adam?
No, Adam was. Adam was. It wasn't God.
He doesn't understand my question.
What?
It was a God. God
What?
set up the situation.
No, if you follow that route, right, then you're going to say the snake is the Kohen Gadol.
No, that's not what I mean.
Why?
Lena understood what I mean.
You're saying Chava is, but Chava didn't take responsibility
It's
either.
not the father.
You're saying God is. That's what I said at the beginning, right? But God is not saying that. God is saying you are like me. There's two of you here. You're both like me. You're both made of my material. You're both in my image.
So what happened?
You can live forever, right?
Yeah.
You can have perfect understanding, right? You are like me, right? If you are like me, you take responsibility for your actions. We don't expect a child to take responsibility for his actions, but one of the things that happens, one of the signs of somebody becoming a mensch, is that they take responsibility for their actions.
You know why it was thrown from the Gan Eden? Because this is exactly what Adam told him. The wife that you give to me.
Right.
I didn't take it. You give it to me.
So you're saying
And
that
he
Yehoshua
just...
took responsibility right away. It's the opposite of what Adam.
Do you
What?
see what I
Yeah. Yehoshua did take responsibility immediately.
Adam did the opposite.
And what?
Hashem didn't say.
He just said,
Hashem didn't say, "Oh, it's too bad. I put
Yeah.
the tree, inappropriate tree, in the middle of the garden and brought their attention." If he would put the tree
It's
of
like-
knowledge in a corner and put something over it,
He didn't have to put the tree in at all. He wanted the tree to be
you put
there.
candy in front of your daughter. How long it will take till she'll finish it?
Not long.
Not long. So
But
you
wait.
put three, and you say,
I think Marshall goes. I will help Rabbi.
No, but what if
goes
instead you put 100 trees filled with candy, and one tree that's filled with
yeah, but you say,
broccoli,
this one, you see,
with broccoli,
don't touch it.
right?
Don't
And you
touch
say,
it.
don't do it, right?
Okay,
you have
just
all the
don't do
candy
it.
you want.
But you're talking...
Right?
Broccoli gonna be bit once.
Right. So what it is it's a sign of lack of menschlichkeit. You're not taking responsibility for what goes on. Our world is filled with things that you can do positively or negatively, right? We don't, if a
God
child...
doesn't give us a test that we can't pass, right?
That's right.
Yes,
That's
it
right.
does. It gives. This test was failed.
That's right.
He could
This
have
statement
passed
that
it.
Hashem doesn't give a test, you can't.
No, it doesn't mean you pass it. It doesn't mean you pass it. Moshe is right. He gives you a test you can pass. Not that you necessarily will pass.
That's the difference between us and God, is that we're not perfect.
That's true.
But you see, but the answer, but
If we
again, the
passed every
answer
test,
of,
we would be perfect.
but the Adam's answer
But that's not what we are
that he said, like, you're Kohen
Well,
Gadol.
we're supposed to try to be.
No, he didn't.
Something probably you did something wrong. That's why that it's the wife that you give it to me.
We're not,
No, but he clearly was making an excuse.
because only
Right? He was
Hashem.
clearly making an excuse. But it's another parsha,
Not
right?
the majority of them.
Let's continue because we're running out of time now. I want to come to a final point, okay?
To create other gods.
Okay.
Back to the
Okay.
case.
Yeah, I know.
Yair ben Menashe symbolized the entire Sanhedrin, and the institutional failure took place. If Achan could exist among the Jewish people, a miscreant whose despicable character was apparently unchanged through the years of miracles of the sojourn in the Midbar and the miraculous entry into the land of Israel, then it necessarily was a spiritual flaw in the people to which the Sanhedrin was insensitive. That flaw had to be uprooted. Paradoxically, Yair ben Menashe's death reinforced Achan's heretical, self-centered beliefs. These are all echoes of things we've heard before. What did he say? Even if a righteous person like Yair can die in battle, then there are no guarantees in life, and each person should seize whatever pleasures they can. Does that echo anything? In what sense?
He says if Abraham died,
If the grandfather can die early, before his years, right? Then what kind of God is this? The grandfather was perfect, and he took him early. obviously the lesson here is, make hay while the sun is up, so to speak.
We don't know.
What?
I think only one person got because
It made no sense to attach oneself to a people and their concerns or battles, or to sacrifice one's life in any cause beyond self-preservation. The accomplishments of the 40s and 50s said, better red than dead. What does it mean?
Better.
No, the accommodationists. That's an interesting phrase. I've never seen it before. The accommodationists of the 40s and 50s said, better red than dead. In America, some people said that. Better to be a communist than to lose to the Soviet Union, right, and be destroyed, right? There were people who were saying, make the deal, right? Achan's contempt for Yehoshua and for his brethren was nourished by the frustration of his royal ambitions. The Navi twice traced Achan's ancestry to Zerach, one of Yehuda's twin sons born to him and Tamar. And it happened as she gave birth, one child put out a hand, and the midwife took a crimson thread and tied it on his hand, saying, this one emerged first. And it was as he drew his hand back, and behold, his brother emerged first. And she said, you have asserted yourself with strength, and he was called Peretz, meaning strong. And then his brother came out, on whose hand was the crimson thread, and she called his name Zerach. Zerach and the dynasty of Zerach harbored a grudge against the Jewish people. A presumptuous Peretz who breached the norms of childbirth and jumped ahead of his brother, robbed them of kingship, but only one descendant acted upon this grievance. It was Achan. Achan is twice described as Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerach, of the tribe of Yehuda. But when he was taken out for execution, Achan is identified simply as, the more direct term, Yehoshua took Achan, the son of Zerach, and he acted as the heir of his disgruntled ancestor, and he lost everything. I think we should hold here, right? Since he got executed at this point. Right.
Okay, dramatic point.
It might seem like a sad moment to end, but it actually isn't, because something that needed to be dealt with was now dealt with. The Torah tells us that there are times where confrontation is a good thing.